service or military honors. I'm going to ask those who can to rise. If you are currently serving in active duty or have been honorably discharged, you may perform the hand salute. Thank you.
Friends, we gather together this afternoon to celebrate the life and to honor the memory of Hal Lewis. Hal's family so very much appreciates your presence here with them this afternoon, which offers them a great deal of comfort and support. Adonai ma'adam v'teda'ehu ben enosh v'chashvehu. O Lord, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days are as a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, in the evening it fades and it withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, return, you mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away, our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. To Hal Lewis, we can certainly apply the following words of the first of the Bible's 150 Psalms, a psalm which summarizes for us in language both poignant and succinct the nature of the good life and the fruits of that life. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked or taken the path of sinners or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, whose foliage never fades and whose fruit always flourishes. Let us take comfort together now in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kohelet, the author of the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us that for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Harold R. Lewis died early this past Saturday morning at the age of 98. It would be true, though it would also be a vast understatement, to say that Hal lived a long and a full life. As for long, Hal surpassed the biblical outer limit by 18 years. As for full, Hal packed several lifetimes worth of activities and involvements into his almost 10 decades. We rejoice that he was a part of our lives for so long, even as we are sad that he is no longer with us. Hal was born in Pittsburgh to Ben and Ida Lewis. He graduated from the Taylor Alderdice High School there. He then matriculated at the University of Pittsburgh and graduated with a B.S. degree in engineering. After high school, Hal entered the Navy and served on a ship in the Pacific during World War II. When he returned from the war, he moved to Buffalo, where he worked for almost 5 years for Westinghouse. During those years, he dated and then married Eleanor Bigler, whom he had met on a blind date. Their marriage was to last for 65 years until Eleanor's death in 2008. In 1950, he and Eleanor moved to Cleveland, where he took a job as a sales engineer for a business named Thermal Products, a company which he and a partner eventually bought. And years later, even at the advanced age of 97, Hal was still making calls to customers. These then are some of the salient facts of Hal Lewis's life. But as interesting as they are, they do not begin to account for the remarkably rich and full life that Hal lived. When I asked Hal's family yesterday afternoon to offer a few adjectives that began to capture the person he was, the first two that they mentioned, and that they mentioned immediately and without hesitation, were energetic and cultured. And both are crucial to our understanding of the essence of Hal Lewis. As for energetic, Hal seemed throughout his life to have boundless vitality. As one of his grandchildren said yesterday, Hal never stopped, often to the consternation of his wife Eleanor, and after Eleanor's death, to his companion Bea, who had difficulty keeping up with him. Hal simply sought to be involved in as many activities as a 24-hour day allowed. Here are some examples. At our temple, Hal's beloved temple, he served as an usher for decades. He was also an active member of our men's club and served as its president. He was on the Pepper Pike City Council for several years and worked hard to pass legislation on projects that seemed important to him. He was a signal voice in starting the city's recycling project, guiding it in the process in order to optimize the efficiency and the effectiveness of this initiative. He also helped pass an ordinance which required people who walked around the community to wear a light reflective garment. In addition, he was one of the founders of the fabled Mayfair Swim Club and served, naturally, on the club's board and as its president. In all these activities, Hal was indefatigable in pursuit of the goals he deemed important. And because of his energy, because of his integrity and his resolve, Hal was regularly looked to lead organizations or one of its projects. And later in life, when new challenges presented themselves, Hal was, as always, up to the tasks which he felt required his attention and his energy. When his wife Eleanor began to decline, Hal insisted on taking care of her at home. And though he had some professional help, he did most of the caregiving himself, going so far as to wash and change the linens and to wash and change Eleanor's clothing. When finally Hal had to move her to Menora Park, he would go every single day to sit with her at meals, to walk her up and down the corridors, and to involve himself in as many aspects of her care as he could. In the process, Hal, now again in the words of his family, drove the Menora Park staff crazy. And after her death, Hal continued his involvement at Menora Park, partly to honor Eleanor and partly to express his gratitude to the institution that had served her so well. And his involvement there was neither perfunctory nor casual. He set up a fund at Menora Park. He went back regularly to serve ice cream to the residents. He called its bingo games. And he commissioned and then erected a sculpture on the Menora Park grounds, which he dedicated to Eleanor's memory. And Hal continued his remarkable involvements well into his 90s. In Florida, he continued serving as a mentor, something he had already done for some years, at the Booker High School in Sarasota. And he served on yet other boards of directors at his temple in Sarasota and on the temple's men's club. And then there is Hal's devotion to culture. Music, as one of his grandchildren remarked yesterday, was his big passion. He played the flute throughout his life, performed with a suburban orchestra here in Cleveland, also in a pit band, and in other ensembles. Remarkably, Hal was still taking flute lessons well into his 80s and early 90s. In addition, he served as a docent for the Cleveland Orchestra, and he loved going to Blossom and watching the Met Opera performances on TV. Indeed, Hal was always so busy tending to his passions that aside from an occasional opera performance, he had little time for TV. In fact, his children remember that during their growing up years, the family TV was in the basement and that their father rarely watched it. In addition to his many involvements and his immersion in the cultural life of Cleveland and Florida, Hal cherished his friendships and responded with quiet energy to the people who entered his life. Hal was the kind of person who always wanted to engage, always wanted to interact with others, and always took advantage of the opportunities to do so. His daughter Mary remembers the time when she asked the participants in one of her speech therapy groups to write letters to a veteran, this time her father, on Veterans Day, and to include a question for him in their missives. And unlike many recipients of letters like this, Hal made it a point to answer each and every one of them and to carefully respond to the questions posed to him. And one of his grandchildren remembers that when he would write a thank you note to his grandfather for a gift that he had received, that Hal would write him a thank you note for the thank you note. And another grandchild remarked that their grandfather was always was happy to hear from us, always interested in our lives, and always made a special effort to get to know our spouses. Once again, connection and involvement. And a couple of weeks before he died, with Hal at this point barely able to talk, someone put a phone to his ear so that he could have a brief conversation with one of his grandchildren. During these few minutes, Hal learned that he was about to become a great-grandfather. At this point, in a voice barely audible, he whispered into the phone, "Congratulations. We'll have to have a celebration in November." And so there was Hal, his condition weakened, his life ebbing away, still looking toward the future, still imagining more times together, more things to celebrate, more life to live. Now, I would be remiss at this point were I not to dwell a little on his relationship with B. Volk. Soon after Eleanor died, Hal met and fell in love again, this time with B. And for the last 9 years or so of his life, he and she were lucky enough to have one another and to have the enrichment of their intense connection. During those years, they took care of one another and found happiness in each other's company. B, of course, was a big part of Hal's life. But also during those years, Hal continued his own full life on his own, tending to his own projects and to his own purposes. Hal Lewis is survived by his 3 children, Matt, Mary, and Rich, by his daughters-in-law, Rochelle and Debbie, by his grandchildren, Dustin and Aaron, Brandon, Samantha and Rob, Brad, and Jason, and by his brother-in-law, Harold, and his sister-in-law, Betty, and by his dear companion, Bee. He was predeceased by his wife, Eleanor, by his brother, Selvin, and his sister, Jeanette, by his brother-in-law, Lou, and by his sister-in-law, Sylvia. It would, as I said earlier, it would be an understatement to say that Hal Lewis lived a rich and a full life. For his life was packed with activity, with projects, and with people. He made an impact on the communities in which he lived, on the institutions to which he was devoted, and to the individuals with whom he interacted. Those who admired and loved Hal Lewis will never forget him. Zichrono livracha, his memory will always be our blessing. Amen. I want to now call on Hal's son, Matt, who will reflect on the life, the qualities, the accomplishments of his father.
Today, I have the honor of sharing our dad, Hal Lewis, with you. Thank you, Rabbi Klein, for your thoughtful words about our dad. He loved going to the temple. He loved going to listen to you and to learn from you. He deeply respected you, and I'm glad you had a chance to know him. If Dad was here today, he'd talk to each one of you. He'd love to be here today. He'd talk to each one of you. He'd look you in the eye like a member of the greatest generation does. He'd listen to your story, and he'd be a happy man for it. Dad lived to be 98 years old, almost a century. A century. And he was amazing. And we called him Amazing Hal. He was a strong, stubborn, loyal, trustworthy, and loving man. He was patient, and he was kind. Incredibly, throughout his 98 years, he had almost no health issues. But in his last year, he started having the slips and falls of old age. And the parts just started to wear out for him. And he'd have a slip or a fall, and we'd visit him in the rehab facilities, and we'd watch him terrify the staff by jetting up and down the halls and asking for more therapy and more rehab so that he could get better and go home, because it was always his purpose to get better, go home to be, and move on. His mantra, which sits on my desk, that he gave me was never give up. And he lived that mantra. He was able to succeed in large part because in the last part of his life, as Rabbi Klein mentioned, he was blessed with a true love, Bee Volk, his late-in-life companion. They cared for each other like they were in one of those classic Turner movies that they loved watching so much. I never saw them fight, not once. And he continued to succeed and to get better and to get back to be. He was amazing. We were so accustomed to this pattern that it was shocking several weeks ago when the doctors called us and said that he was in trouble and we better come to see him soon. So we all gathered up and went down to Florida, and of course, we watched the doctors tell us how surprised they were that he was getting better. Amazing how. But better wasn't well. And luckily we were blessed some wonderful time together, thanks in large part to my wife Rochelle, where we got a chance to talk and reminisce and laugh, and then it was back to rehab. So we went home hoping for the best, but then the rehab called us about a week later and said that we better come back down to Florida. That was Wednesday last week. And my brother Rich and I went back down to Florida to help my dad die. We talked to him, we tried to comfort him, but honestly, we didn't know what to do. We were lost. But Wednesday came, and then it was Thursday. And we held hands, and we found a wonderful rabbi who showed us how to ask for forgiveness and how to forgive each other, and how to tell my dad it was okay to move on. We told Dad that we were okay and that he'd done his job and that it was all right to let go. And then it was Friday. Amazing Hal. Everyone who met Hal remembered Hal. He made you feel like you mattered. He told wonderful stories. It's funny that I bring this story up after the honor guard, but he told wonderful stories, like the one about serving on the ship in the Pacific during World War II, where they would land on an island, steal a Jeep to get around. Then they'd go back onto the ship and take the Jeep with them. They'd go out to sea and sink the Jeep so they didn't get caught for stealing it. And then he played a song over the PA called "So Long, Pal," which all of us know how to sing. And we held his hand and we stroked his brow and we held the phone up to his ear so his grandkids could tell him that they were going to be okay and that he could let go. And B came to visit and he seemed peaceful, but he wasn't ready. And then it was Saturday. And on Saturday, after 98 years of blessing our lives, my dad died. He did so many things. He influenced us in so many ways. He gave me life. He saved my life several times. And I was not alone in this. He was one of a kind, and he'll be a hard act to follow. But most of all, he loved people. He was so curious, so authentic, so beautiful. He loved us. He loved all of you, and we loved him. He was amazing. And I hope now he's at peace. Thank you. Thank you.
O God of life, amid the ceaseless tides of change which sweep away the generations, your love remains to comfort us and to give us hope. Around us are life and death, decay and renewal, the flowing rhythm that all things obey. Our life is a dance to a song that we cannot hear. Its melody courses through us for a little while, then it seems to cease. Whence the melody, and whither does it go? In darkness as in light, we turn to you, the source of life and the answer to all of life's mysteries. Will you please rise now for the El Mole Rachamim? El Mole Rachamim shochein bamromim, hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina, im kadoshim utahorim kazohar harakim azhirim et nishmat Tzvi ben Binyamin shahalach la'olamo, Bala Rachamim Yastireus Beseter Kanafav La'olamim V'yitzror Bitzra HaChayim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato V'yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Hal Lewis, our loved one who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say together, Amen. Will you please be seated? I want to announce that the family of Hal Lewis will receive friends at the home of Matt and Rochelle Lewis at 28726 Bolingbrook Road in Pepper Pike. They will receive friends today after our interment service and until 5 o'clock this afternoon, and again tonight from 7 to 9 p.m., as well as tomorrow, Wednesday, from 2 to 4 and 7 to 9 in the evening. Once again, on behalf of the family, we so much appreciate your presence here with us this afternoon.